It doesn't matter how old I get, whenever September comes back around, it always makes me feel like I should be going back to school. And I left school like 10 years ago, which is making me spiral slightly. But anyway, I always found when I went back to school, I always ended up reading less because of homework and deadlines and exams to revise for. And I would inevitably always fall into reading slumps. But that being said, I always found that reading short but amazing books was the best way to get me out of them. So in this video, I'm going to be recommending 7 books to you, all of which are under 100 pages, in order to help you get back into reading. And even if you're not in a reading slump, these are just great to read in general. These are going to be ordered in page length from shortest to longest. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Katerina. It's lovely to see you here. I make new videos every Tuesday talking about books, and if that's something you're into, why don't you consider subscribing? Okay, enough of me yapping, let's get into the video. So the very first book on my list, coming in at 56 pages, is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is the same author that wrote The Great Gatsby, so this guy has a track record of creating some absolute bangers in my opinion. But anyway, this is a witty and fantastical novella that follows the life of a man who was born as a withered senior and who seems to mysteriously age backwards. And as he grows younger, he embraces life with the knowledge and wisdom acquired, and he literally does all sorts of things, like he runs a business, he goes to war, he falls in love, he has kids, he goes to college. Isn't it weird hearing it in that order? Until one day his mind begins to devolve and he loses his memory until eventually he passes away as a baby. Firstly, straight off the bat, this book is very different from the film. I would say that the film is a very deep, mysterious, and melancholic tale, which I was obsessed with when I was younger. I think I legit watched the film like 20 times. Whereas the book is actually more lighthearted and actually quite funny. It's actually more of like a clever satire on American culture and ageism. And despite it being so incredibly short, it has some really witty and insightful remarks that I genuinely wish were expanded with more social commentary because I just found it so fascinating. And the moral of the story is just really uplifting overall in the fact that age is just a number and it shouldn't stop you from doing all these amazing things in your life. And there were bits in the book that genuinely made me chuckle. Like when he's literally just born, he complains that he wants his own rocking chair, and when he was a toddler, his dad catches him trying to light up a Cuban cigar. And for such a short book, I just thought it was done incredibly well. I really enjoyed it, and this is one I actually just read in one sitting. So if you want to start off really easy with a short book, I would definitely recommend this one. The second book I have on my list for you comes in at 64 pages, and this is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is a chilling psychological story about a woman confined to her room by her husband as a sort of treatment for her nervous condition. However, the more time she spends in this room, the more she spirals, and she ends up becoming obsessed with the room's yellow wallpaper. She begins to see things in it, and she's convinced that there's a woman trapped behind it. The story explores themes of mental illness and societal expectations that are placed on women. Firstly, don't let the fact that this book was published in 1892 put you off from reading it. If anything, it should impress you even more, because not only was it actually very easy to read, it is wild that it's actually still relevant today in the way that it critiques the treatment of women and mental health in society, because the novella reflects on the author's own personal struggles, including her postpartum depression. And it shows that without having the correct and appropriate support from others, it can have very dire consequences. But that aside, it itself was just a really haunting book that I really enjoyed. The writing is so intense and claustrophobic, and it really puts you on edge as a reader. And you follow this woman who initially seems very normal and relatable, just essentially descend into madness. There's also a quote in the book that I very much heavily related to. I cry at nothing and cry most of the time. Like, yeah. Same girl. If you're wanting a more deeper and darker read, then I would definitely recommend this book in the list to you. And I think this book is just great for reading slumps because it generally made me want to read more like horror and thriller after I finished reading it. The next book on my list, coming in at 80 pages, is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. So this book is essentially a collection of 10 real letters written by the poet Rilke, all addressed to a young, inspiring poet who wanted Rilke to give him advice on his work. But then the communications between them then developed into Rilke giving him advice on life in general and just everything in between. I actually think that this might be my favorite book on the list because I really enjoyed this one. Because Rilke's letters just explore such a vast range of different aspects in life, including love, loneliness, creativity, the solitude that comes with being an artist, and the importance of embracing uncertainty. But even with all this amazing advice aside, the letters themselves were just so beautifully written. His words were somehow still so poetic and introspective. And the book just gives you so many meditations to reflect on afterwards, including life, art, and personal growth. And you can tell that Rilke really admires this young poet he's talking to because all of his words are just laced with this comfort and kindness kindness. I initially read this book when I was in a bit of a rough place, and I found that it really helped me because it genuinely felt like a friend was talking to me and giving me advice. One quote on the uncertainty of life that I really love is this one: "Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer." Like, oh my god, slay, Rilke. That is so true. Like, in a world where everything just seems to be falling apart, advice like this is just so nice to hear. And because this is such a short book, I actually want to read it again because it was just so easy to digest and genuinely made me want to pick up some more new books. And that's why I recommend you to read it too. Next up, the fourth book on my list, coming in at 82 pages, is White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So this tale is set in St. Petersburg, Russia, and we follow a man who is essentially battling his loneliness and also restlessness with said loneliness. He's introverted, a little bit shy, and also quite a daydreamer, which are all aspects I would probably describe myself. And he just lives in this self-pitying solitude until one day he meets a girl. And just after a few fleeting moments, they form this really intense and immediate connection. And over 4 nights, they share their deepest thoughts, desires, fears. However, this is not a love story, it is a story about love, and more specifically about unrequited love and yearning. Like the yellow wallpaper, don't let the fact that this book was published in 1848 put you off from reading it. It's a gorgeous novella that's both dreamy and filled with melancholy, and whilst it explores some sad themes of loneliness and solitude, it also captures the beauty of connection in fleeting moments with strangers. I love Dostoevsky because I just feel like he explores the nature of the human condition so well, and particularly here, this yearning and this bittersweet nature of short-lived connections. It personally made me think of people who I've met in my life who I didn't know very long, but I still think of now because they've made such a lasting imprint in my life. And I feel like it would also make you reflect on that as well, and also just this unfair nature of love and time passing in general. If you want a story that's more focused on romantic love, then I think that this one is definitely for you out of this list. But overall, this is just a fantastic book to read and one that will definitely get you back out of your reading slump. The next book I have for you, coming in at 86 pages, is The Death of Ivan Ilych by Leo Tolstoy. This book follows the life of a man who was once a judge, and he seems to have lived a conventionally successful life. He had status, wealth, a family. However, one day he falls ill and he descends into a very slow and painful death. And as he deteriorates physically and also mentally, he is forced to confront the reality of his existence. He considers whether he truly lived after he strips away these superficial layers of his life, and he's then forced to confront this actual emptiness that was in his life. If I didn't fear dying before, I definitely did after reading this book, but the author did a fantastic job in making you realize the important things in life. Tolstoy explores how this hollow pursuit in societal expectations can actually just be meaningless and disappointing. And really, it's a meditation on the temporary nature of life, and also just like the fragility of one's health, which is something you should never take for granted. And I suppose it just encourages you to live with purpose and to authentically be yourself always. It did also make me spiral slightly because you're very much made to think about your own life choices and whether if you were to die tomorrow, would you be happy with everything you've done so far? Which I will leave you to ponder after you finish this book. So apologies for another existential read, but this one was genuinely great to me. It definitely pulled me out of my reading slump and got me back into reading, and I think it will do the same for you too. The sixth book I have for you, coming in at 89 pages, is Foster by Claire Keegan. This novella is set in rural Ireland during the 1980s, and we follow a young girl who is from a poor and struggling family. So her parents then send her to live with her relatives for the summer. These relatives are a childless couple that own a farm, and they treat her with this kindness and care that she just hasn't experienced before. And this story is really about her adjusting to this new environment and honestly experiencing familial love and attention in a way that she's never had. Of all the books on the list, I would say this one feels the most like a proper novel. I just adore this author's work because she writes these very quiet and simple characters, but they're just filled with so much complex emotions, personality, and just uniqueness to them. And I've noticed her plots seem to have this very subtle tension and curiosity in the story of what's going to happen. I also loved her book Small Things Like These, which is actually being made into a film starring Cillian Murphy as the lead. Like, oh my god, I will be seated in the cinema when that comes out. But anyway, this book is also just as stunning. And even though it's from the point of view as a child, it's also still very delicate and lyrical. It very well captures this innocence of childhood, but also the complexity in family life. And it just has deep themes of belonging, loss, and facing reality. And even though it's a short book, it's a very powerful story that I still think about. You can definitely read it in one sitting, because I did, and it will definitely get you out of a reading slump. And the seventh and final book on my list, coming in at 96 pages, is The Little Prince by, and please excuse my French because I know I'm about to butcher this, but Antoine de saint-exupéry. It's probably wrong, but we'll move. This is a illustrated magical French novella that essentially follows a young prince traveling from planet to planet in this universe. And on his journey, he meets a variety of strange but interesting characters, all of which represent different aspects of human nature. The story addresses themes of loneliness, friendship, love, loss, and the meaning of life. This book really pleasantly surprised me because even though it's styled as a children's book, don't be fooled by like the innocent drawings, because this book has some very heavy takes and deep meanings about life. The author himself was actually a military pilot and wrote this book during World War II, so there's a lot of running themes about loss despite the overall very hopeful narrative. And I believe the author actually created this book as a response to being distraught about what was just happening in the world, which same, to be honest. So he therefore purposely wrote this book full of fantastical and unrealistic elements. And the fantasy works in this book because it's more based on the imagination of children rather than the strict realism of adults. And I just love this book so much for its beautiful symbolism. A lot of messages really do pack a punch, even though they're not immediately obvious, and it's one of those books where you can read them many times to pick up the meaning. One of quotes that I really like is, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." Like, no kid is going to get that. That is strictly for adults. And this book is just full of philosophical insights like that. It's thought-provoking, powerful, poetic, and those are all the things I love in my books. And I would say that this is another perfect book to pull you out of your reading slump and get you back into reading. And there you have it. Those are all my favorite books that are all under 100 pages and that you can read in literally one sitting. Have you read any of these books? If so, what did you think of them? And if not, what books under 100 pages would you recommend? I hope you liked this video. If you did, please drop a like down below. It really helps my channel out so more people can see me yapping about books. And if you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I make new videos every single Tuesday. Feel free to follow me on my Instagram. I post a lot more personal stuff on there, but I also post books as soon as I finish reading them. That way you can see what they're about and what I've rated them out of 10. And also feel free to follow me on Goodreads. I'm posting all the books I've ever read on there currently, so yeah, you can enjoy my incoming reviews. And yeah, I hope this video has taught you that size does not matter when it comes to books. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!